Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and secure the compensation you deserve.
Ever try reading one of those legal guides? And
Yeah.
then it's like they're written in a whole other language.
It's a foreign language.
Just seriously.
Yeah.
But lucky for you, we're diving into motor vehicle accident claims in WA today, and we're using this MVA, a layman's guide from Foyle Legal to help us out.
Okay.
It's got all the need to know info. And trust me, there are some surprising details in here.
Yeah, it's a good starting point and surprisingly relevant too, because, WA alone, over 1.8 million drivers and 2.8 million vehicles are covered by motor injury insurance.
Wow, that is a ton of coverage.
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense when you think about how often accidents happen. So what's the deal with this insurance? Is it like a safety net for drivers in WA?
Exactly. It's designed to offer protection, even in situations you might not expect. For example, let's say someone's in an accident and suffers what's called a catastrophic injury.
Okay.
Now, even if no one is found at fault, this system steps in to help with treatment, care, and support.
Hold on, seriously.
Yeah,
Even if no one is at fault.
that's right.
That's wild.
Yeah,
There's got to be some specific criteria for what counts as a catastrophic injury, though.
you're right. There are specific criteria, and we'll definitely break those down later on. But the important thing to remember now is that this whole system is backed by law, ensuring everyone on the road has some protection.
Okay, so it's not just some random insurance policy, it's the law.
That's right.
Got it. Now, let's say you are in an accident. What is the most important thing you need to do right away?
Report it immediately.
Okay.
And thankfully, WA has a super straightforward online system, crashreport.com.au.
Nice.
This one form notifies both the Insurance Commission of Western Australia, or ICWA, and the WA Police.
That's streamlined. Love it. Saves you a headache during a stressful time. But let's be real, in that moment, your heart's racing, you're probably a little shaken up. What kind of info do you absolutely need to have handy for the report?
It's understandable to feel flustered, which is why having that online system is so helpful. You'll need the basics, the exact date, time, and location of the crash,
Right.
license plate numbers of any vehicles involved, and the names and addresses of everyone involved,
Okay.
including witnesses if you can get them.
Right. Those all make sense. You need all those details to paint a clear picture of what happened.
Exactly.
But what happens if, in all the chaos, you forget to file a report right away? Is that like a big no-no?
Well, technically, failing to report the crash could have legal consequences.
Really?
Yeah, it's really important. And this is where we get into who can actually make a claim after an accident. You might think it's only those directly injured.
Right. That seems pretty logical.
It is logical, but there's another group to consider. Individuals who were financially dependent on someone who tragically died in the crash.
Right.
They can also make a claim.
Whoa. I didn't even think about that. That's a crucial detail many people probably aren't aware of. It's not just about your own well-being, but the potential impact on those who depend on you.
Absolutely. And even hit and run cases or accidents involving unregistered vehicles don't automatically disqualify you from seeking compensation. These situations can be trickier, but it's not a dead end.
So we've touched on how fault isn't always a factor, especially with those catastrophic injuries. But what about the not so clear-cut situations, like someone backs into you in a parking lot, or there's confusion over who had the right of way? How is fault determined in those everyday scenarios?
That's a great question. In most non-catastrophic cases, establishing fault is key for a claim to move forward. This often comes down to the evidence, information from that crash report we discussed, witness statements, and sometimes even police involvement if further investigation is needed.
Okay, so it's like piecing together a puzzle,
Exactly.
using all those pieces of information to figure out what happened.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. That ICWA doesn't just rely on what's presented to them. They have their own team of lawyers who review the details to help determine fault.
So there's an extra layer of scrutiny to make sure things are fair.
Exactly. And this is also where things can get a little complicated because there's the possibility of shared fault.
Right.
Even if you're found partly responsible for the accident, you might still be eligible for some compensation, though it might be reduced.
It's worth noting down everything, even if you think it's insignificant at the time.
You got it. It's all about understanding how much each party is responsible and how that impacts potential compensation.
Speaking of compensation, let's dive into what that actually looks like. I was looking through this guide, and it seems like it goes way beyond just covering your immediate medical bills.
You're right. When we talk about claimable expenses, we're talking about the full impact the accident has had on your life, the big picture. This includes things like ambulance rides, hospital stays, visits to specialists, and even x-rays, MRIs, medications, and any medical equipment you might need.
Right, those make perfect sense. But I'm guessing it goes even deeper than that.
It does. You can also claim for things like dental work, as long as it's related to injuries from the crash,
Okay.
rehabilitation services like physiotherapy, chiropractic care, even psychological therapy.
Whoa. I didn't realize the scope extended to mental health as well. That's
Yeah.
so important because accidents can be incredibly traumatic experiences.
Absolutely. And the compensation for psychological injury isn't just limited to the cost of those therapy sessions. You can also claim for the pain and suffering associated with your mental health and even loss of earnings if your condition prevents you from working.
That makes complete sense, but I imagine it's probably really difficult to put an actual dollar amount on those kinds of invisible injuries.
You're right. It's not a simple calculation.
Yeah.
And it often involves working closely with medical professionals to figure out how much the accident has impacted your mental well-being.
Right.
But the important thing is that it is considered a valid part of your claim.
Wow. That's reassuring to know.
Yeah.
It really highlights how these claims are about looking at the whole picture,
Yeah.
like the ripple effects of the accident beyond just the initial injuries.
Exactly. And this even extends to situations where um, someone tragically doesn't recover from their injuries.
Right.
If someone is fatally injured, their dependents might be eligible to claim compensation for things like funeral expenses, loss of financial support.
That's heartbreaking, but so important to address. It's a reminder that the impact of an accident goes far beyond the person who is injured.
You're absolutely right. But let's step back for a moment and focus on the process for those who are recovering. When that recovery period is wrapping up, how is a claim actually finalized?
That's a great question. After all this, how do you actually reach that finish line?
Well, once your injuries have stabilized or you've reached what's considered maximum medical improvement, basically you're not expected to recover any further. That's when the claim finalization process kicks in. The ICWA will look at all the information they've gathered, medical reports, treatment costs, lost wages, all of it.
Right.
And then they determine a final settlement amount.
So it's all about tying up those loose ends, making sure everything is accounted for.
Right. And here's something to keep in mind. Any benefits from Centralink will actually be deducted from your final settlement.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
They deduct Centralink payments from the settlement.
It's standard practice to prevent what they call double dipping. Essentially, they want to make sure you're not getting compensated twice for the same expenses.
Anyway, with all these different factors, how can you be sure you're actually getting a fair settlement?
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of room for interpretation there.
You've hit on a crucial point. That's why it's so important to at least talk to a lawyer before finalizing your claim.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to hire one, but having an expert in your corner can make a world of difference.
Right.
They can help you understand what you're entitled to and make sure you're not accepting a lower settlement than you deserve.
So it's like having someone translate all the legal jargon and fight for your best interests, especially if you're not sure what to do.
Exactly. Now, of course, lawyers cost money. If you win your claim, these costs are usually covered as part of your settlement. But, and this is important, if your case goes to court and you're awarded less than the ICWA initially offered,
Okay.
you might end up having to cover some of those legal fees yourself
Oh, wow.
and potentially even some of the ICWA's fees.
Whoa. Okay. So it's a bit of a gamble then.
It can be. But sometimes having that expert advice and support is worth the risk, especially if it means potentially getting a much fairer outcome in the end.
That makes sense. So when would a claim actually end up in court? What usually leads to that kind of escalation?
Disagreements, mainly. If there's a dispute about who was at fault, the extent of your injuries, or the amount of compensation being offered, those are all situations where things could escalate to a settlement conference or even a court trial.
And that's where having a lawyer who really knows their stuff could be a game changer, right? Especially when it comes to the specifics of your case.
Absolutely. Having someone who understands the nuances of WA law and how it applies to your specific situation is invaluable.
Right.
For example, imagine you're dealing with a psychological injury claim after an accident.
Okay.
It can be really tough to prove the extent of those invisible injuries. That's where having a lawyer who specializes in this area can make a world of difference.
That makes sense. It's not always as straightforward as like a broken bone or something.
Right.
So how do you even find a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing? Is it like searching for a unicorn?
Not quite. Remember that guide we've been using from Foyle Legal? They specialize in this area of law and have deep understanding of how these motor vehicle accident claims work in WA.
Oh, right. They'd know all the ins and outs, wouldn't they?
Exactly. And they cover a huge range of situations, from those minor fender benders to the really complex cases like those involving catastrophic injuries or disputes over who was at fault.
Okay, so they've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the legal stuff, is it?
Yeah.
They also understand the human side of things,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something as sensitive as a psychological injury claim.
You're right. This guide has been a fantastic resource for us today, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
It breaks down this complicated topic in a way that's actually understandable. And it highlights those often overlooked parts of motor vehicle accident claims, like the psychological impact.
totally. It's like having a roadmap for what to do if you're ever in this situation, which, let's be honest, is something none of us can really predict.
And that's the whole point, isn't it? It's about having that knowledge so you feel empowered and know what steps to take if something unexpected happens. You don't have to be a legal expert to advocate for yourself.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, those catastrophic injury claims. Remember how we said even if no one is found at fault, there's still coverage available?
Yeah, that really surprised me.
Well, it's important to know that even in those cases, you still need to file a claim to access that coverage.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. I thought it was automatic if it falls under that category.
It's a common misconception. Just because it's a no-fault situation, it doesn't mean the process is automatic.
Right.
You still need to formally apply for the Catastrophic Injury Support Scheme. And that's another area where having legal advice can be really helpful.
So it's always a good idea to at least talk to someone who knows what they're doing, just to be safe.
Exactly. They can walk you through the specific forms you need and make sure you meet all the deadlines, which, by the way, is another important thing to keep in mind.
Right, deadlines. Because in these situations, time is definitely not on your side.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, there are some exceptions, particularly for minors or those with catastrophic injuries.
Right.
But it's always best to get advice sooner rather than later.
So don't wait until the last minute, basically.
Exactly.
Get the ball rolling as soon as you can.
Exactly. And speaking of getting things moving, let's talk about what happens once you've actually filed your claim. I imagine the process can be pretty lengthy and involved.
Yeah, it's not like they just hand over a check the next day.
Right. Once your claim is lodged, the ICWA reviews it
Okay.
and then might ask you to have some independent medical examinations.
Right.
This is just to assess your injuries and see how you're recovering.
Okay.
And it's important to make sure any treatments you're getting are considered necessary and reasonable by the ICWA.
So there's some back and forth there.
Yeah.
You need to be accountable for the treatments you're claiming. Make sure they're legit. But what if your injuries are so bad you can't work and you're struggling financially?
That's where interim payments come in. If your injuries are stopping you from earning an income,
Right.
you can request these payments from the ICWA to help cover essential costs like medical bills.
So that's a bit of a lifeline while you're waiting. Speaking of which, this whole time we've been talking about compensation and settlements, but it's important to remember that no amount of money can truly make up for the impact of an accident, especially when it comes to things like psychological injuries.
You're absolutely right. Financial compensation is important, but it's not the be-all and end-all.
Like,
It's crucial to acknowledge the emotional and psychological toll that accidents can take.
right.
We've talked about psychological injury claims, but it's worth emphasizing that seeking help for your mental health should be a priority, regardless of the legal side of things.
I completely agree. Your well-being is priceless. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to touch on one more thing from this guide that really stood out to me. The long-term implications of what might seem like minor injuries.
Right.
We often brush off those aches and pains thinking they'll just go away on their own.
It's easy to downplay those things, especially when you're caught up in the aftermath of an accident.
Exactly. But what if they don't go away? What if those seemingly insignificant injuries turn into chronic issues down the road?
Yeah.
It's something to really consider, even if you think you walked away from the accident relatively unscathed.
That's such a crucial point. Don't ignore those lingering symptoms. See a doctor, get advice, and don't be afraid to ask for a second opinion if you need one. It's better to be safe than sorry.
Couldn't agree more. Sometimes those hidden injuries can be the ones that cause the most trouble down the line. So if we can leave our listeners with one final piece of advice today, it's this. Advocate for your own well-being. both physically and mentally. Don't downplay your pain, seek help when you need it, and remember, you don't have to navigate this alone. This guide from Foyle Legal has been a fantastic starting point, but there are experts out there who can help you every step of the way.
Well said. Knowledge is power, and knowing your rights and options when it comes to motor vehicle accidents in WA can make all the difference. So drive safe, everyone. But if the unexpected does happen, remember what we've talked about today.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Claims, explained by Foyle Legal. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes and isn't legal advice. For advice specific to your situation, visit us at Foyle Legal. And don't forget to subscribe or leave a review.